Greetings. This lecture is Pay for Performance and Benefits. These two items are in many ways linked together because there are some elements of pay for performance that are also considered types of benefits. But we'll go through this step by step so you guys can understand how these are the same and how they are differentiated. So the next slide, as always, is our human resource management system, and on the left-hand side we see compensation in the implementation box, and then dead center in the middle we see performance management. Both of those two items work together. We try to do performance management through rewarding people for their performance, and we do this hand in hand with also benefits. As we've discussed multiple times, pay for performance is the thing that keeps people working hard. It affects performance. It keeps people staying there for a while. Benefits really don't have as much of an impact on whether or not someone performs well, but it does have a tremendous impact on whether or not they continue to stay with the company. So it has an effect on turnover and absenteeism and things like that, but it doesn't necessarily have an impact on people's individualized performance. Why do we then care about pay for performance and the big deal? What are some of the assumptions behind it? And pay for performance is how we reward people for the actual work that they do, the level at which that they perform certain tasks. And we could do this at the individual level, the team or the group-based level, the business unit level, or ultimately at the organization level. And it comes with these three basic assumptions. Number one is that everybody is different in the way that they perform, and because they're different, we have to consider everybody's individualized contributions. The organization itself is dependent on everybody doing well in the organization, and what we recognize is, of course, not everybody does equally as well. So because people don't do equally as well, we have to reward people differently. Otherwise, the overall performance of the organization will start to come down. And ultimately, we want to make sure that the performance level, stays high for everybody. In the end, then, in order for us to attract and retain and to motivate high-performing workers, we've got to differentiate between their performance and reward them accordingly, because this is all about equity theory, this is all about performance management, it's all about motivation theories and things like that. If you pay everybody the same, if you reward everybody the same, if you evaluate everybody as the same, even when they're not, it is a reinforcing system that encourages people to not perform well anymore, because people will naturally do the least amount of work in order to get the reward. And so if they see people working less than them or doing work that is less relevant than them, they are less likely to actually perform at the high levels that we want them to. In terms of some legal considerations when it comes to pay for performance, according to the Civil Rights Act, we cannot discriminate based on factors unrelated to job performance when it comes to pay differences. For example, we can't say I'm going to pay women more and pay men less, or vice versa. So what are some exceptions to these rules? Well, it depends on a number of different things. First of all, the exceptions to the rule is if someone's at the very high end of the salary range, and we already talked about some of those salary ranges and how we use those salary ranges. If someone's at the maximum on their salary range, they're not going to get a higher percentage of reward relative to their performance because they're at the top of their salary range. Now, one would hope they would ultimately be promoted into the next category and the next higher position so that they can move up in ranking their company, but if they don't move up and they stay in the same position, they've bounced against the top of that salary range and they really can't go higher than that. And so the most important thing to remember here is that pay line, where we set our pay line, which is where our salary range sits on that pay line, if we don't adjust that pay line accordingly when it comes to cost of living increases and things like that, if we don't decide that we need to lead, lag, or match, and we move our pay line up or down depending on whether we're leading, lagging, and matching, but we really want to continue to reassess our internal equity and our external equity and adjust our pay line so we're keeping pace with what's going on in the marketplace, and if everybody's paying more, we need to be able to catch up with that. So pay line would have to be adjusted if people are at the top of their pay range, and until that time, they would get smaller raises because you don't want them to go outside and over their pay range. Time since last increase is another reason why we would have an exception to the rule. For example, if someone says, we don't have any raises this year because of economic conditions, and then the following year they decide to give people raises, when they can give them raises at any point in time, and certainly for any reason beyond, performance. You can say, well, geez, I'm going to give everybody a raise now, across the board because, it's been, a year and a half since our last pay increase, and because we were cutting salaries and cutting expenses. So now I'm going to give everybody an increase just to kind of reward them for overall, good performance, and then, we're going to move on. So if it's been a long time since we last gave a raise, or if the size of the last increase was really small because of economic conditions, we can adjust for that in the future and give better pay raises in the future. It doesn't necessarily have to be on performance, and it doesn't have to be within a certain period of time. Internal consistency, we talked a little bit about the idea that we want to make sure that jobs of appropriate values are being rewarded in alignment with each other, so that low value jobs are getting lower pay than people in high value jobs, and they should be getting higher pay. And so we want that to be in that nice little correlation, as you saw on the slideshow from the last lecture on compensation. So the point of that is we can make adjustments to people's pay if we find out that they are not internally consistent. So if we find that there's somebody who is not doing a good job, or they're doing their job and they find that they're getting paid less than everybody else, and they're doing as equal a good job in terms of their performance, what we want then is to give them an increase to get them in alignment with everybody else. And we see this a lot when it comes to gender or race, where there may be some systematic discrimination going on. Adverse impact, perhaps, is the way we might look at it. But in that adverse impact, women might be paid less, or minorities might be paid less because of institutional reasons. And so if you look at them and you see they have the same performance, they have the same contributions, the same basic evaluations, if we find they're getting paid less, we can give them an automatic bump to get them in alignment with the internal consistency. And then lastly, when it comes to external competitiveness, if there's an external market out there and we're competing for somebody outside in the market, another company is going to pay them more money, we can give that person more pay than would be appropriate necessarily within our internal consistency model, because we want to be able to attract that person to our company, and if that's what it's going to cost to attract that talent, we'll pay that for that talent. And it typically happens when there's external pressures, when there's a market for their career skills outside of where they're working now. They can demand more money, and we can be justified in giving them more money. If you're working in a comprehensive university, for example, where you have a medical school and a law school and an engineering school and a business school and, say, arts and sciences, people who are at the medical school make the most amount of money because they have salaries of doctors are the highest probably in the industry. And so in order to keep them to stay in academia and not go back into private practice in medicine, we have to pay them more money to stay in academia than we might pay other professors on campus, because there's an external demand for their skills and we want to keep them here. So we have to pay them a competitive wage to keep them at the university. Number 2 on the list then would be law schools. And then following that would be engineering schools. Usually, it depends on where they're at. Here at SIUE, our engineering school makes less than the School of Business, but most other schools, engineering actually pays at least the same, if not more, than the School of Business. School of Business is next, and then followed by arts and sciences. And the big challenge, of course, is how do we, reconcile internally when we have some faculty in the arts and sciences, for example, in philosophy, where they make $60,000 or $65,000 a year, and starting salaries for business professors is around $100,000 a year. So you see these differences in the way external competitiveness can really mess up internal consistency in an organization, but it is justified if, again, based on market conditions. When I started my doctorate and started working at my job in 2002, I made almost twice the amount of money that my my mother-in-law made, who had worked in academia for 20 years. And the difference is that I was a professor in business, which paid a lot more, and she was a professor of Islamic literature. And there's not really a market for people who are experts in Islamic literature outside of academia, so there was no external pressures to rise her salary to be similar to mine. So she still lagged behind me, even though she had been, working for over 20 years in that area. In terms of different kinds of performance-based systems and pay-for-performance plans, we have merit pay, performance bonuses, and incentives. Merit pay is how we reward people for past performance. And so what we basically do at the end of the marking period is we look back, we decide how well that person performed against the current standards that we have set for them. If they performed well, then they might get a percentage increase of their base pay. And so it's embedded in their base pay. And a performance bonus is set up in such a way that that we still look back on their performance, but instead of giving them an increase in a percentage of their pay, we give them a bonus in a lump sum format that's not necessarily embedded in their base pay. So you might get a bonus at the end of the year of several $1,000s. Let's say you get a $2,000 bonus at the end of the year. It doesn't get rolled over into your salary. Your salary it goes back to what its normal level was. And so what you find is with the merit pay situation, there's the compounding effect. So that if you get a 10% bonus, and then you get another 10% bonus on top of that, and on top of that, the rate increases, in a compounding way, sort of like the difference between simple interest and compound interest, right? Performance bonuses are like simple interest, right? Merit pay is like compound interest, where you're an interest on the interest you've already made, and it keeps the compounding more and more and more, so it adds up. Whereas performance bonuses, you get a bonus every year, but it doesn't go into your base pay, so the bonus is still based on whatever your base was every single year, not based on this compounding effect. Both merit and performance bonuses are backward focused, where they look back on your performance, and incentives are future focused, where they're trying to create a context for you where you are motivated to follow the incentive and to do the work that's being asked of you. The nice thing about incentives over merit and performance bonuses is that incentives actually give you a good sense of what the reward will be, and you can decide whether or not you want to do the job. Merit and performance bonuses, you don't know if you're going to get either, and you don't know certainly what the amount would be if you get it. So incentives are nice because all the information's up front. You can assess the situation, you can look at it, and you can decide, yes, I want to increase my performance in order to get this reward, or no, I don't want to increase the performance to do that. And incentives can work at multiple levels in the company. There's all sorts of incentives, and anything that you do at the individual level can also be done at the group level. But there's pros and cons to doing different kinds of incentives based on what kind of incentive you give, as well as some of the issues of what it is you're exactly rewarding. So with an individual incentives, you can do piecework, which is like, for everything that I create, I get a benefit. I get a little pay increase. So if I'm in a manufacturing environment and I make, 10 socks, 10 pairs of socks, I'll get a reward for every pair of socks that I make. And then as I make more and more, the rewards get richer and richer. So I might, for the first 100 socks that I might make 10 cents a sock. And then from anywhere from 101 to 150, I might get 12 cents a sock. And anything that I make from 151 to 200, I might get 15 cents a sock. So the incentive is that as you make more and as you hit certain thresholds, your pay starts to go up. So it creates this financial system rewarding you to continue to make more and more. Commissions are like sales reps or real estate agents. They get a commission for a sale, which is a percentage of the sale, whatever that might be. We can also have incentives in terms of suggestion systems, all sorts of games and awards, like, attendance awards and things like that. And the thing with the suggestion systems and the games and the awards, sometimes people just want notification or notoriety and acknowledgement of their contribution, and sometimes that's an incentive in and of itself. Other people do it because they like, there may be a cash award attached to it. So if you make a good suggestion, you could win $1,000. If you make if you are not absent for the next year, other than your allowed sick and bonus time, you can turn around and go, I want this, I can get a benefit, maybe a prize or a plaque or something for not being absent on the job. What are the advantages of individual incentives? Well, number one, if you reward people for a certain level of performance, they'll continue to work towards that because they like the compensation attached to it. Because people are very goal-oriented and financial-oriented, although it's not the only thing that obviously motivates them, it shapes people's goals and it keeps them moving, forward in that direction. So I would attach a reward, an incentive to a particular goal, so that as people accomplish the goals, there's an incentive attached to it. It's also really good because it helps the firm achieve individual equity, so that if I'm working harder, I'm going to get paid more. If I don't work as hard, I'll get paid less. If I don't work at all, I won't get paid at all. So it creates it's a self-regulating equity system in terms of pay. Lastly, one of the great incentives is that individual-based pay fits within an individualistic culture. So our culture is very individualistic focused. So because we're so individual focused, I'll get rewards based on my efforts and not based on everybody's efforts. The disadvantage of incentives is that a lot of times when you link pay and goals, people get very single-minded about the things that they do because they're only going to do the things that get them the rewards. Another challenge with individual incentives is that a lot of people don't believe that pay and performance are related to each other. They might believe that people work really hard and they never, ever get rewards. So there's no point in me believing that your incentive system is going to increase my rewards because no one has ever gotten increases in pay, in past systems. And so we might find that, if we're not making a good case in developing our performance appraisals between pay and performance, it's not going to be an incentive for people down the line. Another problem is that incentive pay plans may work against quality goals because, as we've talked about, pay and quality, production and quality are inversely related. So what we find is there are a lot of, as quality goes up, productivity goes down, and vice versa. As productivity goes up, quality goes down. And what we're hoping for is, as we do quality training and quality planning and TQM and things like that, if we want people to do a lot of high-quality work, we have to reward them for a lot of high-quality work. And so we create a system that basically embeds both the quality goal as well as the productivity goal simultaneously. And lastly, an individual-based program promotes inflexibility. If you say to your employees, these are the only things that I'm going to reward, and this is what you have to do, people again become really focused on, I'm only going to get paid for this, so therefore that's the only thing I'm going to do. And so you start to see some inflexibility in that people aren't really interested in doing the actual work that it entails. So, going back to the point about employees not believing that pay and performance are linked, if we do a lousy job in our performance appraisals, it's going to absolutely bleed into our pay for performance systems. And so we always have to do a really good job in performance appraisals in order to be able to do that link. One of the things that we notice too, though, even though we may reward people for better performance, and we may have an incentive set up that says, here, if you do this, you'll get better. We want you to to perform well, so I'm going to reward you for it, we find that it depends on the kind of work that the people do. When people are doing very rote work that requires very little creativity, it's very task focused, and there's no ambiguities about what the tasks entail. So creating more socks, or creating more shoes, or creating more cars. The pay for performance link works really well. People will really perform a lot in order to achieve the reward. But if you want people to be really creative, and you're saying, I'm going to pay you to be more creative, you're going to notice that they're not going to like that. And in fact, they're not going to do very well at it at all. We have found through a lot of research that people don't perform well on creative tasks when they are given an incentive. We have to find other ways to motivate them to be more creative, and those are more intrinsic motivators and not the extrinsic motivators. We could also do group incentives, also the same sorts of things, and some of the challenges are a little bit different when you do group incentives. Number one, group incentives encourage more cohesiveness among team members, because we're all in this together, so we're all going to work really hard together. It encourages people to be more cohesive and to really cooperate. It also aids in performance management. So when we have a group incentive, it also is a check and balance, so that everybody in the group starts pushing the people who aren't doing their share to start working harder, because it's a tool that we can directly use that impacts performance. So the group performance measures how well the group is doing, then everybody in the group has to pull their weight, so it kind of pushes in that direction. The negative side of it, of course, is that because we're in an individualistic culture, there's a lot of disadvantages. People don't like them very much. And so it's hard to get people to think about, how can I cooperate and share a reward with others when they don't work as hard as I do. And so I want to make sure that the work is being done the way I want it to be done. So that can be a problem. Free riding is a big issue because people can hide in groups. And so if it's the group outcome that's being assessed, individuals don't have to contribute the same way, and they will still get the same reward as the group does. Next, there are also the social pressures to limit performance, and so we might find that unionized environments or things like that will want to slow the rate at which people perform, so that you're not having people that are working really hard, really fast, and working harder than everybody else and faster than everybody else, because that tells the organization that everybody can perform that way, which is not necessarily true. And it says, well, if one person can do it, then everybody could probably do it. It also puts excess pressure on people. So what we find in unionized environments and other locations is that there becomes these social pressures to keep at a certain pace. And you're expected to keep at a certain pace if you want to continue to be in the crowd in the organization. So that can be a concern. The last issue with group incentives is that it involves a lot of intergroup competition. So, when we try to pit groups against each other to be more productive, it may actually create a situation where people are destroying other people's work, or they are doing espionage and figuring out what's right and what's wrong, and then they're destroying people's things and stealing from others. They sabotage each other, basically. Intergroup competition is good, but high levels of intergroup competition can be dysfunctional for the business. So you want to keep things at friendly level rivalries. You don't want things to get too intense, because if you do that, then it's going to fail. In terms of the business unit, we're doing things like gain sharing, and there's ImproShare and the Rutgers programs. All these different types of programs are set mathematical formulas that help us to determine how much we can share in the improvements of the organization in terms of productivity and efficiency and things like that. So as a company becomes more productive, more efficient, those gains in productivity or those gains in efficiency become a portion of those become a benefit that can be shared among all the employees, because it encourages them to behave in a way that's more effective and more efficient. And things like that. So the advantages, of course, is it gets people's input on what we're doing and how well we're doing it and what we should do differently in order to improve production. it has everybody moving in sort of the direction of this common goal that we all have something to work towards. So since we all have something to work towards, we can manage that. And then lastly, it's not so difficult to measure. It's a set formula. Those are the variables they use are not uncommon, so it's really easy for someone to say, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to do it, and and this is what it's going to measure, and it just gets done very easily. Part of the challenges, of course, is that low performers can hide. When you're doing gain sharing. It can. Some of the criteria for triggering rewards may not be something that someone feels is fair or should be worked on, so that can create a problem. And lastly, things like major management labor strife. Management and labor have very different ideas about gains in productivity or proficiencies and efficiencies. And so because management has one idea and labor has another, it's difficult many times to do gain sharing and these kinds of business unit level reward systems, because there's always infighting as to who rewards what and how much reward everybody should get. Organization-based incentives are things like profit sharing and stock planning. These things are also considered benefits, but they are also a form of pay for performance at the organization level, because it means that we're sharing the gains in sales and profits with all the employees, and the same thing with the stock plans. The advantages, of course, is it makes it really flexible for the company to do things. It increases people's commitment because they like the idea of sharing the future profits of the company, and of course it always has tax advantages. The disadvantages is that the employees are at risk. If most employees can't directly affect the day-to-day operations of the business. That's typically something that happens in the top management suite. So if the company looks like they may be performing really well, but in the end it's really just a lot of smoke and mirrors and espionage and subterfuge and bad business decisions that are just being hidden away, the stock price starts to go down. The value of the company starts to go down, and someone's profit sharing and stock plans starts to go down. So we don't want to be in a situation where the company is putting all of your rewards in a form of a reward like a company stock or some sort of profit sharing, where in the end your chances of you getting it are slim to none. There are also tax advantages, obviously, to doing these. I already talked about the tax advantages, sorry. Another effect is that these organization-based incentives really don't work on individual productivity. It's about retention, but it's not about individual productivity. And lastly, if the company deals with these profit sharings maybe in the short term, it could have some long-term financial difficulties. For example, if the company starts to go under and then they owe people profit sharing that's maybe spread out over a few years, this can be a real problem for people because they want to be able to manage their cash flow in a way to help them to improve. And so if we've got some long-range financial difficulties, it means I'm not going to be able to pay people the way I wanted to. Some of the challenges that you have with pay for performance is a lot of times people will only do what they're being paid to do. So if you've got an incentive system that says this is what I'm going to get paid for, that can be a problem. Another problem that comes with pay for performance is that people don't always cooperate because they feel like they're competing against each other, and you have to be mindful of avoiding that as you design these new pay for performance systems, is to make sure you're encouraging cooperation, not challenging it. And there's this lack of control, where even though I can create a pay for performance system for my employees, I can't control whether or not they're going to engage in it, and they may decide in the end that they don't like it at all. We may also have issues with psychological contracts where even though we have a great pay-for-performance system set up, if we violate the psychological contract with our employee by treating them unfairly in some other manner, it's going to affect performance. So even if we have a great system set up, people may not partake in it. Then there may be what we call a credibility gap, right? The credibility gap basically says, I know you say you're going to reward us, but you've not ever done it to date. So even though you say you're going to do it, you don't do it. So I don't believe you now that you say that pay and performance matter. Other issues that may affect pay for performance is an individual's job dissatisfaction and stress. If I'm feeling dissatisfied or if I'm feeling higher levels of stress, it doesn't matter how good the incentive system is, I'm probably not going to engage in it because it's just too much effort to be able to do that. Lastly is that link between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. When we only focus on extrinsic motivators, we diminish the impact of intrinsic motivators and intrinsic drives. And what we need to do is have a balance of the two. And we also need to focus on the intrinsic drives and how they influence performance. Because we want to have higher levels of creativity and things like that, we need to have more intrinsic rewards rather than less. Successful pay-for-performance systems pay people for their performance appropriately. There's a tight link between the two, and it's paid appropriately. Another aspect of a good system is that the pay-for-performance plan is part of your broader HR system, which it basically means is we recognize how it affects performance appraisals, individual performance, individual skills and abilities, how that contributes to the overall culture of the company, how this helps me in terms of task management or in the way we organize it. So if you can imagine the impact of a pay-for-performance system, how it needs to be embedded in a larger HR system. So I want to make sure that if I'm doing pay for performance, that I've also got a performance appraisal system that works really well, and a training and development system that works really well, because all those things go hand in hand in terms of managing people's performance overall. You want also people to trust you, so you've got to be able to follow your word and be able to do that. So a good system is building trust between the employees and the employers. It also encourages people to believe that performance matters, that it actually does make a difference, and they have to be able to show it to them that if we perform better, it means more money for everybody. We should also use multiple layers of rewards. I mean, if you're worried about people only doing what they're getting paid for example, if I'm getting paid only to work well as an individual, but you really want me to work in a team-based environment and you want me to be more efficient in the way that I do my work, then you need to have not only individual rewards, but team-based rewards as well as business unit level rewards. Good pay-for-performance systems get employees involved so that they create the criteria, they determine what's good performance, they give feedback on their peers' performance, and all these things are an important part of getting them involved and buying into a good pay-for-performance system. And then lastly, you don't always have to use extrinsic rewards. You can use motivation or non-financial rewards as well. Okay, now that we have finished pay for performance, we'll move into the section on employee benefits. And the first thing we're going to do is review some of the legal considerations regarding benefits, because they are slightly different than they are for other employment laws or EEO law in other contexts. So we'll start with pregnancy discrimination, and as we know, the law basically states that if we offer health care benefits to our employees, which we all need to at this point in time, then it has to cover pregnancy and childbirth as well. And pregnancy is basically treated, as you know, like any other short-term disability, because people are going to be off work for a temporary period of time. We're never pregnant forever, and then they come back to work. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the implication for benefits is that we want to make sure that we aren't using people's workers' comp history to make a determination whether or not we're going to hire them. We have to assume that people are willing to do good work. It doesn't mean that after the fact we can't do some investigation, and we could certainly let them go if we find that they have engaged in fraud, because fraud can occur in workers' comp. But the bottom line is, we always assume with the best of intentions that people were legitimately sick on the job. We find that with workers' comp, that violates, discrimination. That's a discriminatory practice based on someone's disability. We're assuming that they're disabled because they took workers' comp. And when they do take workers' comp, obviously it's a temporary situation, and many times it can be permanent, but a lot of times it's temporary. So we don't want to treat them differently because they've had a disability because of workers' comp. Other aspects are Family and Medical Leave Act, where we private employers have to give unpaid leave, up to 12 weeks unpaid leave for their own or serious illness or the birth birth or illness of a child, or birth or death of, illness or death of a parent or spouse, or and things like that. So obviously there are implications for who is considered a child and who's considered a spouse, as we talked about in some of the environmental trends and sociocultural trends that are going on sort of out there. But Family Medical Leave Act was a law passed under Bill Clinton, President Clinton. There is some talk now about actually moving from unpaid leave to paid leave. Of course, there's a lot of people that are going to resist that, but there are a lot of countries that have paid leave for illnesses and sick and birth and adoptions and things like that, and it doesn't create any economic problems for them. So, we'll see how that progresses. Other laws, Age Discrimination and Employment Act. We can't deny benefits or have differential benefits for those that are over the age of 40. Erisa is how we manage our retirement plans, and there are all the laws involved around retirements. Basically, it talks about the fiscal responsibility we have in managing retirement plans, and it also ensures that people are able to accrue their benefits over a 5-year period in order to be able to fully access all of their employment rights. And just like our checking accounts are managed by FDIC, they're insured by the FDIC, the retirement plans are insured or protected by the PBGC, which is the Pension Benefits, I forgot what the G stood for, the corporation. So the goal is that the PBGC sort of makes sure that the funds are being managed appropriately, and people are accountable to them for those types of deliverables. The Economic Recovery Tax Act says that we are allowed to set up pre-tax money aside for dependent care, medical expenses, and things like that. So medical spending accounts are beneficial because we take the money off the top. Let's say we take $1,000 off the top. And then what we do is every time we have a medical bill, we can use our medical spending account to decrease our to pay for our bills, and that money is already taken out of our account, but it's taken out of our account pre-tax, and so that's set up as a separate way. And then whatever is remaining in our salary, let's say we set aside $2,000 and our salary is $50,000. Instead of paying taxes on $50,000, I'm now paying taxes on $48,000, which is a little bit less. So that pre-tax money enables us to have less of a tax liability because, paying for medical expenses, paying for dependent care expenses, these can be really costly. So this is helpful for us in terms of a pre-tax benefit. COBRA, and it still holds today, even as far as I understand, under the Affordable Care Act, that private employers have to, if they terminate you for whatever reason, whether you're fired or you're retired or you're laid off, you're eligible for the insurance from the company for up to 18 months afterwards, and you pay it at the employer's rate, not at the employee rate. So you pay a decreased amount for the benefit you had. And considering that I paid for healthcare insurance on my own for a family benefit and it cost me over $1,000 a month, whereas I might pay less than that, maybe only a couple $100 a month, that's a good thing. And so it enables people to still keep their insurance benefits even if they are unemployed, because it gets really expensive to maintain benefits. And if you have a chronic illness or a catastrophic accident, you want to be able to have those things available to you. The HIPAA, 1996, basically eliminated many of the restrictions on pre-existing conditions, and then the Affordable Care Act removed them entirely. It also talked about privacy issues and making sure that information is only being shared with the people that we want the information to be shared with. Otherwise, information will not be shared sort of broadly and open for everybody to access. The Affordable Care Act of 2010 is still currently the law of the land, but we don't know how much longer that will last. The most recent efforts by the Republican Party to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act with a different plan failed. They weren't able to get the votes to pass it. we won't get into the politics of it all, but it's basically, it's important for you to know that the Affordable Care Act currently makes sure that people with pre-existing conditions are covered, that they still require plans to cover adult children up to the age of 26 on their parents' policies. They cover 100% of their coverage for preventative services. And the goal here is to be able to set up a minimum standard that everybody has in terms of the quality of their health care. And if policies don't meet those requirements, they are required then to either upgrade those policies, or they don't pay the insurance, pay a penalty, a tax basically, and the employees then go out into the open market to be able to find their insurance. There are lots of subsidies that are available, and the goal is, the way that this was designed, and it's not a perfect design, but the way this was designed was to ensure that if you have a larger pool of people where you're spreading out the risk, it brings the costs down for employees. And so that works well for those of us that want to get the insurance. We get lower rates, but the insurance companies are leaving the market because they're not making the profits that they want to make. Are they suffering? Well, it's debatable. Are they making lower profits? I'm sure. Are they making no profits or untenable profits? No, not at all. I mean, the insurance companies are making money hand over fist. So I think that there's a lot of debate as to whether or not the Affordable Care Act is doing what it needs to do. We do know that there were many, many, many more people that are insured now that weren't before, many more people that have better quality insurance policies than they had before. And I think the goal here really is that we need to come up with a better plan for how to ensure that everybody in this country has the right, not the privilege, but the right to have, you know, a good health care plan and to be healthy. I don't think the Affordable Care Act is a perfect plan, but I think that we do have an obligation to fix what's wrong with it while not necessarily gutting you know, what we have. And I know that the plan that was presented by the Republicans recently in spring of 2017 basically said people weren't going to lose their policies, but in fact, the way the standards were set, it looked like many, many more people were going to lose their benefits and lose subsidies. And so the price of the insurance was going to go up. But we can get into all sorts of political debates on this. But, you know, again, I think that insurance is a right. I think we all deserve the right to have that. And I think that's a big part of why we have to be really careful about how we manage a replacement plan, because we don't want people to lose their health insurance, what they have already. We want to make sure it's available and a reasonable ability to access it, you know, for all. In terms of mandatory benefits, there are handfuls of mandatory benefits. Social Security is one, and then Social Security is broken down into things like retirement benefits, disability benefits, Medicare, which is health care benefits, and then survivor benefits for minors whose parents die before they are of age to work and support for themselves. And also, if you are married for more than 10 years, the spouse can collect the other individual's instead of their own Social Security benefits if the other person's benefits would be greater than their own. Workers' comp is basically you get medical benefits for work-related accidents, and so the goal is that we want to, it's considered no fault, and everybody, the company is required to pay for an injury that happens on the job. Unemployment compensation is when someone is laid off through no fault of their own, you know, because they don't respond to training or anything like that, or they're just not capable of, it's just a bad match, not capable of doing the job. People can get unemployment compensation, and they basically then try to get some of the money, giving them some money so that they are able to sort of survive while they're looking for more work. It's not a government handout. This is based on an insurance policy that the company buys. They buy into this policy, and then the policy basically pays out the benefit to the employee who's been laid off, and it's sort of done through the state system in that manner. The last element that is mandatory, of course, is the health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. And again, as I said, we don't know how long that will be, but for now, it is a mandatory benefit. Other types of benefits are more voluntary benefits. One type of voluntary benefit is severance pay. So if people get laid off, then they have to be paid severance. They don't have to be, but a company can voluntarily pay severance to an employee to apologize or to make amends for having to lay them off. Typically, you get about 2 months if the company doesn't give you enough advance notice, so you get 2 months pay that way. Supplemental unemployment benefits. Organizations can buy a policy above and beyond what's already out there, so that it enables them to add even more money on top of what someone would get if they were unemployed. Retirement security benefits include things like pensions, defined benefit and defined contribution plans, or 401k, 403b plans. A defined benefit is where the company says when you retire, you will get twice your salary. It's guaranteed, no matter what. And that a lot of companies are getting away from, because a defined benefit basically says the company has to guarantee that they'll get that money when they retire. And that's always a challenge when you're trying to predict what interest rates are going to be over time. And if there's economic downturns, that can be a problem. A defined contribution plan is much more likely. It's where people know how much money they'll put into it, but there's no guarantees what will come out because, again, economic conditions and things like that. A 401k or a 403b is not necessarily a pension that's managed by the company, but the money is given to this external vendor and they manage it themselves. And it's a form of a defined contribution plan, so that a 403b is typically done in a nonprofit organization or an educational institution, and a 401k is usually in a for-profit. And in both of those circumstances, there's the money is all taken out pre-tax, and then it's given to somebody to manage in terms of the investments. With the advent of the Affordable Care Act, we now understand that healthcare is a mandatory benefit, but there are other insurances that you can utilize that is purely voluntary. Organizations don't have to give you dental care, and they don't have to give you life insurance either. So dental, life, vision, those sorts of things, these are all voluntary insurance offerings that a company can give you. Financial services like profit sharing and tuition reimbursement, where you get once you complete a class, you submit your grade and you get reimbursed for that benefit. And then other kinds of miscellaneous services like charitable contributions. A company will match what you do. Getting a company car, which is a taxable benefit, but a benefit still nonetheless if you have a job that requires a lot of driving. A concierge service is where if you are in a company that's really busy, all the time, what they'll do is they'll have a concierge at the company in the lobby, so that you can go in, and if you need to buy somebody flowers because you forgot, and on the way on work in the morning you remembered that you wanted to buy flowers for somebody, you pay them money and they'll make sure that the flowers get delivered. If you want to have your laundry delivered to work or your dry cleaning delivered to work, it can be done to the concierge service, and you pick it up and you can take it home. So this way it makes life easy. It sort of does all your little chores for you while you are doing your job, and so you don't have to worry about running your errands during your lunch hour or running errands after work or having to leave early. The concierge service takes care of all those kinds of errands for you. You can even get groceries delivered to them, and they will take care of it for you until you're able to take them home. Credit unions are fairly common, and SIUE has a credit union you should take advantage of. And then transportation benefits. In a pre-tax benefit, employers will set aside money to help pay for commuting costs, or they might donate a special card so that people can ride public transportation and things like that. So that's always a good benefit. And then we already talked a little bit in the beginning of the term about ways to avoid problems with absenteeism, and one of the ways we can do that is making sure we manage the days off the way that we have days off for people. You can have a combination of vacations and personal days and sick days. Sometimes you can lump them all together in one plan and say you get these many days to use to be off work, as many as you want. Once you do more than that, then you're going to be held accountable for it, and it's going to cost you. It's not going to be free to be off work. So we can use those plans, and that will help us to minimize absenteeism if we have really good sick day plans. We can try to manage the absenteeism problem a little bit better. The last thing we'll talk about is flexible benefit plans. And when we talked a long time ago in class about how there were some benefits that seemed to be available for married people with children and other benefits that didn't seem to exist for people who were single and didn't have children, and how do we manage that? And the way that we manage that is through what we call cafeteria plans or flexible benefits plans. And the goal is that everybody gets a pot of money that they get to spend towards benefits. And then I can customize my plan the way that better suits my needs. So if the company says 10% of your salary can go towards benefits, you can pick and choose how you want to spend that 10% of your money. That's sort of a nice benefit. So there's a couple of different ways we can do that. The core cafeteria plan says you have to get this core benefit of, let's say there's like 3 or 4 things that everybody has to have, and then you can kind of customize your plan after that, so you can have more of this or more of that or less of one thing or another, and so you can really customize the plan to you. A buffet plan basically says you can have whatever's available here. You can eat more or you can eat less on certain items, but you will get at least one of everything on this list, and then you can add more or decrease more depending on what works for you. An alternative dinner plan is where the company sets up meals already set for you, and there's custom meals. There's custom meals or custom benefits packages for people who are retiring, who are close to retirement age, where they might get more money in their retirement funds as opposed to putting it towards child care benefits. And then people who are younger, who have children and things like that, they want to have more vacation time, and they want to have more sick days, and they want to have child care benefits. And so it enables you to customize a plate of benefits that goes to the employees, and then I come into the company and I can choose the family plan, or I can choose the retiree plan, or I can choose the young hip and single plan, and I can get a benefits plan that sort of tries to match my needs more closely. The difference between alternative dinner and core cafeteria is that core cafeteria gives me a wide variety of different choices, whereas alternative dinners basically says you have 4 dinners to choose from, choose one of them. Core cafeteria says you can have this appetizer. Everybody has the same appetizer, but how you want to spend the rest of your meal is different, and it's all on you. The nice thing about these flexible benefits plans is that they're easier to administer, and the easiest to administer is the buffet plan and the alternative dinner. Core cafeteria is a lot more complex because of the different kinds of benefits attached to it and the different kind of varieties of benefits that can be attached and the levels of customization. But by and large, the alternative dinner plan basically is the easiest to manage. And this way we can have perceptions of fairness when it comes to the rewards. Everybody gets their own sort of custom plan, and it doesn't feel like some people are getting more or better rewards than others, how that works. So that's it for pay for performance and benefits. Thank you.